It's Rhythm and Soul Radio. I am Marco Nobles. We have our virtual studio open, and today in the virtual studio, we are joined by musician, songwriter, producer, DJ Williams. What's happening, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
let's
me.
start with the EP first. You have the new EP by Way of RVA. So obviously for those who have a sense of initials, RVA, Richmond, Virginia. But you were originally born in these parts. We're based here in New York. You were born in New Jersey.
Yeah, Plainfield, New Jersey. Just like 30 minutes outside of New York City.
Yeah. So now,
home of George Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic.
Right. Yeah, so that's an immediate musical connection right there.
Absolutely.
So how early did you and your family move to Virginia?
We moved to Virginia early in my childhood. It was like the late 80s. I want to say 1988. We moved down to Virginia. They wanted to get away from the city and wanted us to have a little slower paced childhood. So that's why we went down to Virginia.
Okay. So this was before even teenager or anything like that. This was
absolutely, yes.
Was how were you like 3 or 4 yet?
I was 7 years old when we moved down to Virginia.
Okay. So I did read that you first started your first instrument. I mean, you're known as a guitar virtuoso, but your first instrument was piano then.
Yes, that's correct. At 4 years old, I started going to the city. I took classical piano with a lovely lady named Miss Suzuki.
Okay, so you went from Plainfield, New Jersey, into New York City to do piano lessons at 4. So your mother, father was taking you in. That they felt that important. They felt it that important that you had piano lessons at that time.
Absolutely, I was tinkering on that piano from almost as soon as I could walk. So I think they saw the early passion in me and wanted to just instill that in me and get me started on an early path in music.
Okay, so obviously they saw something in you, but would you say you grew up in a musical household, or was it just that your parents appreciated music and kind of
it was a little bit of both. My dad is a guitar player and piano player, and my mother plays a little bit of piano as well. And I have 2 sisters, and by the time we were 4 years old, we had to pick an instrument that we wanted to play and stick with it a little bit. And that's kind of like the beginning of a teaching of discipline. And they knew that fostering a child in music kind of opened new pathways in the mind. And that's what they really wanted to instill in us.
Excellent. So you got to pick your instrument. So you started on piano, but so did you pick guitar at that point when they said you could pick an instrument?
No, guitar didn't come till almost later in high school with me. And that was when I started having friends who were putting bands together, and I really started to look towards guitar because, like classical and jazz were one thing, but I started getting into like Nirvana and started getting into like the hip hop bands of like Tribe Called Quest, and something about the guitar just spoke to me. And as soon as I started playing with that with bands, it was just instantly I knew that guitar was my voice.
Okay. And again, we're talking to DJ Williams. The new EP is by Way of RVA. Now, as we're talking about instruments and playing instruments, you played every instrument on this EP.
That is correct. Piano, guitar, drums, bass, keys, and vocals.
Okay. Now, this is what your 4th or 5th EP, I believe?
This is my 4th solo record. Yes, sir.
So is that something you've done on all the records? You played all the instruments, or?
No, this is the first one that I did completely alone. I dabbled in maybe some drums and some keys on the other ones, but I mostly hired some close friends of mine who were a little bit more proficient. And this has kind of always been in the back of my mind to do a record completely by myself. This is like a bucket list venture for me. And I decided that it was time, and I really had the time to commit. I built a studio right here in my home, and completely just dove in head first into this project. And it's something that I'm really proud of.
Excellent. So you decided, that you wanted to play all the instruments on this. You said it's a bucket list project. But also it's your, I guess, love letter to Richmond, Virginia. So talk about what Richmond, Virginia kind of has meant to you growing up there, after moving there from an early age.
Absolutely. Richmond has such a vibrant music scene. Just, Virginia in general, these are someone that fostered Johnny Guitar Watson, D'Angelo, Timberland, Missy Elliott, like the list goes on. Dave Grohl, even from Foo Fighters, he was born in Arlington. So like this, growing up in Virginia and seeing all this vibrant music around me is the reason I feel is the way that I sound, the way that I play guitar. And coming up, growing up, going to clubs like Twisters and seeing Devil's Workshop, Big Band, Modern Groove Syndicate, Oregon Hill Funk All-Stars, all these local bands of Vail, they inspired me, and they're the ones that really influenced my sound. So I wanted to write a record that had all these sounds that I grew up around to pay homage to my hometown that fostered this love of music in me, but also fostered the sound that I have in me as well, too. So it's like a love letter back to Richmond saying, thank you.
Okay. Because a lot of people certainly might not think of Richmond as kind of like a music hub. Yeah, certainly people talk about New York or LA or Atlanta or DC, and by proximity, there's that whole DMV influence. But
absolutely,
but Richmond in particular is very interesting. It's interesting that you're shining a light on it that way to be able to kind of salute those around you.
Yeah, and I think that's what you also brought up a good point, but shining a light on Richmond as well that hasn't really gotten, I think, the national or international attention that I think that it deserves.
Right. Speaking of being able to give national attention, you're in the midst of a national tour. As an independent artist on your own, it's 26. I don't know, 26 cities, but it's 26 dates.
26 dates for this tour. After we just did a 21-date spring tour on the West Coast as well too. Okay,
so you broke it up. So talk about that as an independent artist. Being able to build to that point, you're on your fourth EP, doing it all yourself, independent, artists. I mean, in a way, everybody's independent these days because of the way the label situation has been set up or has fallen apart, I should say. But independent, is more than just the music by yourself. It is also the business aspect and touring and figuring out where to play and where to perform. Now you have somewhat of a head start because you spent years as a touring artist with one of the major well-known bands in the industry, but it's still different having to put it together yourself.
Absolutely. And I always felt that my live show was my strongest asset. And I wanted to really, as I broke away from being the hired gun from other major artists and taking the stuff that I learned from that, I wanted to build a grassroots kind of word of mouth fan base. And I think the best way to do that, the best way to garner that, and the best way to have a long time fan base is through my live show and actually being in front of people face to face. And that's why I'm out here grinding on the road as hard as I am.
Right. And I should mention that you spent a number of years playing with Carl Denson's Tiny Universe, which many people have heard of, and that they have a real live following, I should say. They tour heavily. How much of that influenced you in terms of, or educated you in terms of setting up or maybe building relationships as you're kind of going along and being able to say, hey, I'm an artist, or when I come back, or when I come back around from my own thing, I can reach out to these people to be able to
Carl Denson was definitely a huge inspiration for me. This is someone who I was a fan of before I even met and we even joined a band with. And this is someone who is well into his 60s and still touring heavily on the road. And I watched this man go from playing with Lenny Kravitz to starting the Gray Ball All-Stars. And while I was playing with him, I watched him get the offer for the Rolling Stones. So he built this thing from something that was his own and broke off to do his own thing now to playing with one of the biggest bands in the world. And that's something that we all want in our careers. Well, we look for longevity. And so I've learned a lot from watching him and how he works. And I'm at the same age now he was when he started the Tiny Universe. And I'm looking just to have a longevity and to just be relevant in the music industry. And that's the reason I'm on this path right now. It's because of him.
Right. It's Rhythm and Soul Radio. We're talking with DJ Williams, the new EP is by Way of RVA. He is on the 26-day tour currently, on the summer leg. He just mentioned he did the spring leg. So as you built this out, was this part of the plan when you were deciding to work on this EP, to say, okay, so with this EP, I'm going to, do it the way I want myself, play all the instruments, and then when I take it, I want to be able to take it on the road, so I need to do the spring tour on the West Coast and make my way east. Talk about that process and how you kind of laid that out.
Yeah, my plan initially was to just always keep putting out music. I've put out a record every year for the last 4 years, and these are records of music that I'm really proud of. So a lot of this stuff started with me writing these songs in hotel rooms when I was on the road with other artists like Carl Denson and other people I've played with in the past, and never seen the light of the day. And I think during the pandemic, just like with everybody else, we all kind of had a chance to do a lot of inner work and this was something that's in the back of my mind. I said, it's my time for me to put myself out there and start getting my own music out there. And I really am trying to build my own fan base based on just touring and doing this live show.
Excellent. I think you mentioned to me before we started that you're in Colorado now, and you're going to be making your way here to the East Coast, coming in New York, coming up on June 19th, I believe it is.
Yep, at Cafe Wa with a good friend of mine, Marcus Machado.
Yeah, now talk about that, because Marcus is a good friend of ours as well. He is also an amazing guitarist. So the two of you, on the same show, talk about that. And as you build your tour, do you look for artists in the various cities that you can work with that kind of complement you? How do you kind of go through that process?
Yeah, so the band that I have with me was chosen. I'd say there's 54 rotating members of people that I play with out of my band. Because when I first started this thing, I was actually, it was a logistics thing. It was like I can't afford to get a bus and put all these guys on there. I'm still starting in smaller clubs and theaters, so I would literally tour by myself, and I was flying to my New Orleans show and calling my New Orleans buddies to be, or going to San Francisco and calling my Bay Area friends to be on the show. And it was a logistic thing. But then it kind of turned into, I actually like the variety of this. And I actually really like how different artists interpret my music differently and how it makes for a different show. So even the same song with this band is going to have a whole new energy and a whole new light when I have come to New York and I had my friends with Marcus Machado. Even with the band, I'm touring with the same band on this tour, but even as we go through cities, I have different horn players that may come sit in, or a different drummer that may come sit in and bring some of like that life or some of that local love from that city into the show. So you get a one-time experience for that night. Like, this will be the core band, but these few people who live here will actually be on the show as well. And it keeps it fresh and it keeps it different. And Marcus is actually coming to Colorado this week to join me on some shows. And that's why he's going to be putting me in front of some of his fan base. And we've known each other for a while. And it's, I think this is part of the love of what we do, is that we get to share the stage with our friends because we're family, and then the audience gets to see this interaction. I think that makes it a very beautiful thing.
Awesome. There are some, getting back to the EP. First of all, it's 6 tracks on the EP?
It is 6 tracks. Well, I meant for it to be more, but as I was doing it all myself, it literally came down to I got exhausted and kept it to a short EP.
So, because you mentioned that you had so much music, and you've been churning out, an EP a year. So, do you still have to whittle it down from, say, 20 tracks to 6, or is it okay? I did, I got another 6 ready to go after the last project. So let me go with, this. Yeah,
6. This one, like the album I did last year, is a full album of 12 songs. It's called Soldier of Love, but I had hired guns on that, so I could. The workflow is easier when you have other people doing it. But like, this is literally me in my home recording drums and then running to the bass and then running to the keys. And after 6 songs, I was so overwhelmed and exhausted and still having to mix and master this thing, I decided to just break it up a little bit. So it was more of a matter of logistics than it was. And I think it makes it easier to digest, for people who have an EP. And I'd rather put out an album of 6 songs that I'm all really proud of instead of trying to, throw some fillers in there, trying to make it a full record,
Right. And I've read that one of the tracks you ended up with like, it was tracked over like with 22 tracks that kind of mix it down. Am I
Oh
reading
yeah,
that
like
right?
the cover. I did a version of Nirvana's Heart-Shaped Box, and there's 22 vocal tracks on that album.
Wow.
It's very Brian Wilson, Beach Boy-esque, like huge vocal stacks and harmonies. Just because I figured I'm not going to try to recreate this live, so I want to try to have something just really artistic and for myself on this album.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask too, because when you start to create, when you're creating music like that, do you create it with the thought of, okay, how will this play live, or I need to do this in a way that I can still pull it off live?
I try to keep that out of my mind. Actually, I was just like, I'm gonna just do this now, and then I'll figure out how to do it live later.
Okay. Yeah, because that sounds like it'll be hard. You got 22 different voice tracks and the different harmonies to try to create or recreate when you get to the live setting.
Yeah.
But like you said, you kind of can work that. That's another part of the creative process, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. So once again, DJ Williams is Rhythm and Soul Radio. DJ Williams will be on tour coming to New York City at the famous Cafe Wa down in Greenwich Village on June 19th. And that show, do you know the time of that show?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, we'll have it by the time we're done.
For sure. But all the info for what I'm doing is at djwilliamsmusic.com.
And that was going to be my next thing, to remind people, let people know how they can find you and keep up with you, certainly here in New York, but around the country as people are listening to us on RhythmAndSoulRadio.com, nationwide. They can be able to follow you because you mentioned you're in Colorado. You'll be coming here to New York, and obviously, I'm assuming you're going to make your way to Richmond. At some point, unless you started there.
Yes, sir. June 30th, I'll be down in the old stomping grounds.
Right. There you go. And then making your way around. But certainly also, people want to follow you on social media. How do they do that?
I'm on Instagram, and everything is under DJW Music. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.com/DJW Music.
Okay, great. And you already said the website is djwilliamsmusic.com. And I'm assuming there they not only find out where you're performing, but also can get not only the new EP by Way of RVA, but also previous EPs or albums.
That's correct. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you very much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. Certainly look forward to being able to hopefully catch up with you when you get to New York, so we can meet in person. That would be great.
I hope so, man. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
All right, Rhythm and Soul Radio, DJ Williams, the album by Way of RVA, excuse me. I had a repeat in my head. And I thought I'd be able to find the time, but again, June 19th at Cafe Wa. Many of you who are in New York, you know Cafe Wa. Cafe Wa is a legendary event you hear in New York City. And so it will be great to be able to see DJ Williams along with Marcus Machado performing live in such a great venue for great music. And certainly we hope everybody gets to go out and enjoy. And, we look forward to seeing you as well. And let's see, I'm trying to decide which track to play, but Mr. Nobody is your favorite track, as I understand. So we'll go with that.
Mr. Nobody. So I am very much an introvert at heart, but I have this stage persona and this person that kind of comes out of me when I have to be live or be on tour. And I've decided to name that person Mr. Nobody. So he's the mask that I put on, my extrovert mask, when I gotta be out there shaking hands and kissing babies. And
okay.
So I decided Mr. Nobody does such a great job at it that I owe him a song.
There we go. So that'll be a great way to introduce DJ Williams musically to our audience and those listening around the country and around the world. DJ Williams, thanks again. Here's Mr. Nobody.
All right, y'all take care.
Rhythm and Soul Radio.